Hello, everybody. Welcome into GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Tuesday, March 11th. If you are just tuning in, we have a lot to get into. Day 2 of NFL free agency is here. We'll go over everything that we have to for the major moves that happened after our show and throughout the day today, as well as getting into the winners and losers from day 1 and day 2 of NFL free agency as we take a look at who is left on the board and what has gone on so far. We also take a little bit of our look at baseball. Garrett Cole, one of the best pitchers in MLB right now, out for the season. Tommy John surgery. He will undergo it his second year in a row. He gets injured in the spring. Not a great sign for an aging star or for the Yankees. And we preview what the Detroit Tigers might look like this year. But before we do any of that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Tuesday, March 11th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into a little bit of what's gone on today in NFL free agency. NFL free agency day 2, and we're going to start off with one of the bigger moves from last night. We saw the Chargers go out and get their new running back, right? They go out and they get former Steelers running back Najee Harris on a 1-year, $9.25 million deal. He's going to come in presumably to replace the job that J.K. Dobbins did last season. J.K. Dobbins, pretty solid last year. He's not the perfect running back. Neither is Najee Harris. Najee Harris isn't a guy that I'm going to look at and say he's going to be an elite person. He's going to be an elite running back. But what he can do when he comes in is be a solid power back. You have a couple of other guys that can be change of pace back there. This is, again, a deep running back class, although running back is probably not the number one concern that the Chargers need to address. Bringing in a guy like Najee Harris, they probably could have gotten J.K. Dobbins for cheaper, and maybe he's a little bit more reliable. With the injury history with him, I do understand going out and getting somebody else, but Najee Harris being gone, I think it's about an even split for them. One more big quarterback move was taken care of today as well, as Daniel Jones moves to Indianapolis. Daniel Jones will compete for the starting spot over there, and this is a really fascinating spot for him, right? The Colts have said that it's an open competition for Anthony Richardson. Anthony Richardson, I think at this point, might even consider, if I was him, asking for a trade. I know that I still believe he can become something, although that's definitely fading. But Anthony Richardson in his career has only started about 20 games so far. He barely started any games in college. He doesn't have a lot of experience. He's dealt with injuries. He dealt with benching that messed with his confidence and stuff. But he showed us stuff. He showed us that he can be a competent starter. And he just needs a year where the Colts believe in him fully. And this is not happening, right? The Colts are saying, we don't believe in you. In fact, we think Daniel Jones might be better than you, which is not great, right? Daniel Jones is probably the 34th-ish best quarterback in the NFL. He's a borderline starter. He's someone that can come in and be competent. He's someone that can come in and probably be a top 30 quarterback in the league, but he's not someone that you're going to look at and be like, wow, he's going to change the game. A former top 10 pick of the New York Giants, it doesn't work out. Whether that is because he was on the Giants or it's because of him, it's to be seen. His confidence was shattered. He's a little bit iffy on some of those deep balls, especially now. He used to be pretty good at hitting those in his early years, but it hasn't been the best since. Daniel Jones to the Colts is a really interesting one, and I think we might see a couple ripple effects across the league, potentially even an Anthony Richardson trade if they can get maybe the Browns or the Giants or the Titans to decide to, take a swing on a guy that they clearly don't have a lot of faith in. Outside of that, the Vikings have been busy. They went out and got 3 big name guys. We're going to start on the offensive side of the ball. They went in and got offensive guard Will Fry. Will Fry for 5 years, 188, not 100, just $88 million, excuse me. That is a lot of money for a really good guard. He's going to be excellent in pass protection for whoever's going to be the quarterback back there, whether that be J.J. McCarthy, as he's the only quarterback on that roster right now, or they go out and get a guy like Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson to fill in for a little bit and be a solid backup for them, right? Right now the Vikings are building up that offensive line pretty good. I am very, very, very happy with the way that they've done it. But it's not just the offensive line that they've built up, it is also the defensive line. You've got to build from the trenches if you want to win football games, and they've found that. They've done that successfully the last couple seasons. They've addressed their biggest issues, and they're going to continue to do that. They got 2 big-name defensive tackles. Jonathan Allen on a 3-year, $60 million deal after the Washington Commanders cut him. And then they're planning on signing Javon Hargraves when the league year starts and he officially gets released by the San Francisco 49ers. That is a lot of great movement by them. This is a really good Vikings squad we saw last year. The defense with Brian Flores is really good as well. Seeing them continue to add quality signings to them, to that defense, especially in a position where they were the weakest at interior defensive tackle, the interior of the defensive line, it's going to be a dangerous, dangerous team. Every single team in the NFC North is going to be one that you don't want to play. Staying on the defensive side of the ball, we're going to take a look at a couple safeties that found their way to new teams. The Saints were busy today. They brought back both Tyrann Mathieu and Juwan Johnson. Juwan Johnson getting a 3-year, $30 million deal, but they also went out and signed safety Justin Reed. I love this signing for them. 3 years, $31.5 million for Justin Reed. He was the top safety on the market after the Giants went out and got Javon Holland. This was a huge signing. The Saints are not a team that I think are going to be pretty dangerous at all. They're going to run back basically the same squad, but bringing in a defender like Justin Reed that can be extremely versatile at the safety position is just a great person to bring into that locker room, especially when you're trying to build any kind of culture. We also had, I kind of teased it a little bit, but Javon Holland signed with the Giants. The Giants have been busy in that secondary especially. They bring in Javon Holland today. Safety for 3 years, $45.3 million. They also brought in Paulson Adebo yesterday on a 3-year, $54 million deal. Lots of money for those two, but those two are some of the best, and they're pretty young. They're both 25 years old. They're both going to contribute to a pretty solid defense, one that could surprise a lot of people as we get into the league. As we get into the league year, as we figure out what's going on with this Giants squad. As long as they can stay healthy, that defense should be one of the best in the league, probably one of the better units that we see. The Falcons went out and got another former 49er in Leonard Floyd. Leonard Floyd has had 8.5 sacks in each of the last 5. It averages 8.5 sacks in each of the last 5 seasons. He has been amazing for them. He's a veteran presence, and he addresses the biggest need for the Atlanta Falcons. Bringing in a guy like Leonard Floyd is going to do wonders for this defense as they lost Grady Jarrett to the Bears. They lost, most likely, they're going to lose Matthew Judon, although he still is a free agent. Maybe they can find a way to bring him back. They still need more edge rushers in the draft, but that's been the Falcons' biggest weakness for a long time. Getting a guy that can consistently get 8 sacks every single year is pretty big, and Leonard Floyd comes back home to Atlanta. And then there was a trade. The last big piece of news that came out today was a trade between the Eagles and the Texans. The Texans have been wheeling and dealing their offensive linemen. They send Kenyon Green and a 5th-round pick over to the Philadelphia Eagles in exchange for CJ. That is really interesting, right? The Texans already had one of the strongest secondaries in all of the NFL, especially with their cornerback room with Lassiter, and on the other side, you have your all-pro cornerback, right? This is an interesting deal. I think they're going to they're continuing to add to their strengths while taking away from their weaknesses. So at the end of the day, I don't really know what the Texans are doing. There aren't a lot of great offensive linemen left. All of them have really been scooped up in this free agency class. We take a look at the guys that are remaining. None of them really step out and scream, this is going to be a guy that's going to come in and make a big deal. They brought in Laken Tomlinson, a guard, for a 1-year, $4.25 million deal, but the Texans desperately needed to protect CJ Stroud, right? What they're doing by blowing up the offensive line, not just blowing it up, but getting rid of the pieces that could have had a rebound season, it doesn't make any sense to me. They get a 5th-round pick, give up a 6th-round pick, so maybe they're trying to get better in this draft, but I just don't really see the vision behind what the Texans are doing this offseason. I like CJ DJ. I really do like what he's doing. I really like the player that he is and what he can bring to this Texans team. But at the end of the day, you need that offensive lineman more than you need a safety, and I don't really like this deal that much. But let me know what your thoughts are. Ravens went out and got D-Hop, a 1-year, $6 million deal. I don't think that's too big of a deal, just because D-Hop is a little bit older. Having another wide receiver over there, we've seen them try and get a similar move like this when they brought in Odell Beckham Jr. a couple years ago. That wasn't really as big a splash as we all kind of expected it to be. I think D-Hop still's got a little bit of juice left in the tank, but it's just not going to be one of those moves that really moves the needle too much for me. DeAndre Hopkins, a little bit too old as we head further into free agency. We will keep you updated on everything going on around the world of sports, around the world of free agency. But real quick, Caleb asks, who do you believe wholeheartedly is the worst free agent signing? Right now, I think the worst free agent signing is going to be Sam Darnold. That's a lot of money to give to Sam Darnold. We talked a little bit about it yesterday. The Seahawks, and we'll talk about it when we get to our losers section of free agents, winners, and losers. The Seahawks went out and they traded a top 10 quarterback in the league in Geno Smith for a guy that isn't even top 16, not a top half of the league quarterback, arguably top 20. I could see him falling anywhere from like 17 to 24 in that range, but you gave up the most important position in sports for a 3rd-round pick, Geno Smith, and you replaced him with a guy that's not going to be able to handle pressure anywhere near as good as Geno did. It just doesn't make any sense to me. That, I think, is the worst signing of free agency so far. But we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, winners and losers. We're going to start off with the winners. Who's done the best job so far in free agency and the offseason? We'll talk about that coming up next here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Tuesday, March 11th, if you were just tuning in. We just finished going over all the big moves from day 2 of NFL free agency. In this segment, we turn our attention to the winners of free agency so far through 2 days. We'll talk about who had the best class of the free agencies and trades so far. But before we do that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around. talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Tuesday, March 11th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into a little bit of who had the best free agency slash offseason so far. We have 6 teams that I think have done an incredible job, better than the rest. We're going to start off with the Indianapolis Colts. We talked a little bit about them bringing in Daniel Jones, but the main reason that I think they had a really good offseason is because they were able to build their secondary. They went out and they got a really, really strong secondary addition with cornerback Charvarius Ward and safety Cameron Bynum. Getting those two guys, both young, on pretty solid deals, 3 years, $60 million, 4 years, $60 million, respectively, to go and quarterback your defense, a defense that has already been kind of middle of the road, really takeaway heavy defense, and also bringing in Lou Anarumo to be the defensive coordinator. All of that combined, I really do think this Colts defense is primed to have a huge step up. They brought back a lot of key guys as well, especially on the defensive side of the ball, and I really do like the way that they're building. This is a Colts team that I think could be good next year. I think they did take a little bit of a step back, but I do like the way that they're handling free agency so far with the money that they have to spend. Another team that I think has done an amazing job thus far is the New England Patriots. They came into this free agency with so much money. They came in with $127 million in cap space to spend, and they have done it the best way they possibly can. They went out and they traded for they signed Milton Williams, for free agent, Super Bowl champion, defensive tackle from the Philadelphia Eagles. They basically ripped him away from all the other teams, outbidding them by almost $20 million in total contract value. He was reported originally to go to the Panthers. The Cardinals were in on it. There were a couple other teams that were in on Williams, and at the end of the day, the Patriots swoop in with their big money bags, and they take the guys that they wanted. They brought in a whole bunch of linebackers to help shore up that linebackers core, including Harold Landry. I love that move so much, as well as bringing in an elite offensive lineman, at least in his prime, a little guy that's going to have some veteran presence in that locker room. I'd like to see him go out and get a wide receiver. Of course, that's at the top of their minds, but they've done a really good job on the defensive side of the ball, shoring that up a whole bunch, getting some corners, getting some safeties, getting some linebackers, getting some defensive linemen, and getting some offensive linemen to go and fix this team as much as they possibly can. I think the Patriots have had a really good offseason so far. Another team, number 3, that I think is having an amazing offseason. How about those Chicago Bears? We talk about building in the trenches. That's exactly what Ben Johnson and the Chicago Bears team have done. Not only have they revamped the entire offensive line, signing Drew Dahlman, for center from formerly of the Atlanta Falcons. They traded for guard Joe Tooney from the Chiefs, as well as guard Jonah Jackson from the Rams. That is a completely revamped interior offensive line that's going to do wonders for the development of Caleb Williams. You've got a solid right tackle. You have a left tackle that you can draft, or maybe even you can go sign as free agency continues to go onward. But this is huge for them. That is 3/5 of a new offensive line. 3/5 of that offensive line now play at minimum Pro Bowl caliber throughout their career. I love what they've done over there, but the trenches goes both ways. It's not just on the offensive side, but on the defensive side of the ball, they've built through the trenches as well. They've already had one of the better defenses in the league last year, especially in the first half, but bringing in a guy like Grady Jarrett to go and help up the inside of that defense, also get some quality pass rush, is really good. And edge rusher Deo Odingbo, that's going to do amazing, right? This is a really good team. You already have a couple of guys that are established down there on the defensive side of the ball. Just getting some tertiary or secondary pieces for them are going to do wonders to make sure this defense doesn't fall off a cliff like they did at the end of the season, whether that be because of the head coaching situation, they were tired, they were injured. I think this is a defense that can bounce back to early season form, especially if the offense continues to can play the way that it's expected to now that the offensive line is all the way back. The Vikings also did a very similar thing. They shored up those trenches, right? They brought in interior offensive line. They brought in Will Fries. We talked about that at guard. They brought in center Ryan Kelly from the Indianapolis Colts. That is a really good duo. We've seen them play together before. This is something that will work again, something that has worked before, and the Vikings are basically just moving that Indianapolis line up north a little bit. And then the Indianapolis line that was one of the best in football over the last couple years. Not only that, but again, they shored up that defensive side of the ball. Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave today, those two are big, imposing guys on the inside, guys that can make a difference in the run game and in the pass game, and in the defensive system run by Brian Flores. Those two are going to be amazing. But it's not only that, right? They were also able to retain some very important pieces. Aaron Jones, probably the best running back in this free agent class, was re-signed for a 2-year, $20 million deal, as well as Byron Murphy, one of the top corners. A lot of the top corners had to go other places. We've seen some of the Vikings have to go. But what they've been able to do by retaining some of the important players, shoring up the trenches on both the defenses and the offensive side of the ball, this is a Vikings defense and a Vikings team that could compete for that division yet again. And this is a division with the Bears, with the Vikings, with the Lions, with the Packers, that once again could all win 10-plus games, which would be wild if that happens 2 years in a row. Two more teams that I thought have done a really good job, and it's just because of the trades that they've done so far. The Raiders have gotten the best quarterback available in Geno Smith. We talked about it. I think Geno Smith is a top 10 quarterback in this league, probably the 10th best quarterback here. They were also able to retain Max Crosby, and crucially, they were able to give him that biggest non-quarterback extension before the price skyrocketed. This is what we're talking about when we talk about getting your players in early before the price goes crazy, because just a couple days after they brought Max Crosby back for $35.5 million, Myles Garrett went and said, "Oop, $40 million, please." He went out and got that deal done. That is very smart of the Raiders. I don't know why other teams don't do that. We're going to see on our losers list, a couple teams are there just because the repercussions of that deal signed by Myles Garrett. Max Crosby and the Raiders, not a part of that deal, not a part of that list, because they got in early. They got in when the price was relatively lower. But it's not just that. They also signed some good value deals. Jeremy Chin, the safety coming from Washington, formerly of the Panthers, I really do like him. He's a very physical guy. They lost a couple safeties. He's going to fill in that Moreg spot. But this is someone that I think can really come in and shore up this defense quite a lot, as well as Alec Kappa to help with the offensive guard slot. 2 years, $11 million. It's pretty good value for a guy that, if he can bounce back after a down season, is going to do wonders for this team. And the last one that I think did a really good job this offseason so far is the Commanders. And a lot of it has to do with Adam Peters, the new GM that they brought in. He has been wheeling and dealing, not only bringing Deebo Samuel for a 5th-round pick at the end of the day, if you could count some of the other moves he made, basically getting Deebo Samuel for nothing, as well as Laramie Tunsil to shore up that offensive line. Those two moves are going to do amazing stuff for this offense. Being able to protect Jaden Daniels, giving him the ability for more weapons to get the ball out of his hands quickly, like they did all season this year. Laramie Tunsil should have a bounce back season this year. They did give up a lot for him. A 2nd, a 3rd, and a 4th is a lot of draft capital, but overall, I think Laramie Tunsil is worth that much if he can come back to all-pro status like he has in the past. But it's not just that. They brought back veteran leadership, right? Some of these guys that might not be the most effective on the field can still play solid ball, but they are more important to that locker room. Bobby Wagner and Zach Ertz, your veterans on the offense and the defensive side of the ball, kind of found a home in Washington. It was a great locker room, a great chance for them to impart their wisdom on these young guys as this team continues to build. And as this team continues to develop a culture, having those guys around for another year is going to be huge for them. But it's not just that. Again, they also fixed a lot of the major holes they had. The biggest issue for them last year was on defense. After losing Jeremy Chin, they bring in Will Harris to fix that role. And he's a little bit more of your traditional safety, not really going to be able to be as hard-hitting in the run game. But that's going to be good for them because they needed a lot of help in the secondary. But also bringing in Javon Kinlaw from the Jets. He had a relationship with Adam Peters back when they were both with the 49ers. Javon Kinlaw, to fix the run defense, is their biggest weakness at the end of the day. And I think having him and maybe getting another defensive tackle in the draft or continuing to find some guys in free agency, the Commanders have had an amazing offseason so far, and they are for sure on our list of winners. Overall, the teams that I think have done the best so far are the Colts, the Bears, the Patriots, the Vikings, the Raiders, and the Commanders. They've all had amazing off seasons. A couple teams that barely missed out on the list here were the Panthers. They've spent big, but it hasn't really been groundbreaking stuff. The Broncos have spent not a lot of money, but they've gotten a lot of great names to come in. Hufanga and Dre Greenlaw, to name a few, to come in to join their team. Those are a couple teams that almost made the list, just short of the winner's status, but a couple honorable mentions there as well. But let me know what your thoughts are. Who do you think has had the best free agency so far? We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we turn our attention over to the losers of free agency. Not everybody can have good days. Not everybody can bring in the best free agents, and we're going to talk about the teams that did the worst. We'll be right back here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now. Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Tuesday, March 11th. If you were just tuning in, we just went over who had the best day or two of free agency, who had the best offseason as a whole. In this segment, we turn our attention to the other side of the coin. Who had the worst free agency? Who had the worst offseason so far in the NFL? But before we do that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Tuesday, March 11th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into a little bit about the worst off seasons in the NFL. There are a couple teams that stick out right away, right? A couple teams that I don't think are going anywhere near improvement. But the number one loser, the team that I think by far has been the worst team this offseason so far, is the San Francisco 49ers. And it's not because the players that they have. It's because their lack of action combined with the loss of talent. You take a look at what they've done, they haven't gotten too many guys. In fact, their biggest addition, not just by name value, not just by money, but those two combined, is tight end Luke Farrell for $20 million a year. $20 million total over 3 years. That is their big money addition so far, which in and of itself would have been fine if they didn't go out and lose 19 players, a couple of which have been massive contributors to this team over the year. And this is just because they're starting to become cap strapped. They're trying to figure out what to do with Brock Purdy, right? Brock Purdy is someone that's going to demand a lot of money, and they're going to deal with the consequences of that. Some of that has also to do with the fact that they've started to pay their guys. Brandon Ayuk got his big payday last year. That hasn't really worked out the way that they expected it to, at least immediately. But now they've been forced to lose a lot of really big production. They trade away Deebo Samuel. That hurts a little bit, right? But they were ready to move off of him. They trade him away willingly. Then they cut a lot of their guys. Kyle Juszczyk, a guy that's been a symbol of the 49ers, a guy that's been a part of them for 9 years, wanted to keep playing for them, is cut, probably won't be back. Leonard Floyd gets cut, immediately gets picked up. Javon Hargrave gets cut, immediately gets picked up. Malik Collins gets cut, still out there, but that is a contributor to this team. That's 5 guys already, and we haven't even gotten to the guys they lost in free agency, right? They lose Dre Greenlaw, one of the best linebackers, a guy that's the heart and soul of this team. Charvarius Ward, by far their best corner, in a spot where they have been the weakest in their close to dynastic run in the NFC. Taliza Hufunga, the safety, really stepped up a couple years ago. He is gone, goes over to the Broncos. They lose Aaron Banks, one of their starting offensive linemen, and an offensive line that started to crumble last year due to injuries and guys leaving. We also saw Jalen Moore, another one of their offensive linemen. Again, offensive line starting to crumble and leave. And those are all guys that started games, had huge roles, but they also lost a couple depth pieces. They lose Elijah Mitchell. He goes to the Chiefs. They lose Josh Dobbs, backup quarterback. He goes to the Patriots, right? This is a team that has lost a lot. This is a team that still has money to spend, but they're not going to have a lot of the guys that made them get to the top of the mountain where they were just a play away from winning the Super Bowl in overtime against the Kansas City Chiefs in the last second of overtime against the Kansas City Chiefs when they lost that game. This has been a brutal offseason for the San Francisco 49ers, and I think by far they're the biggest loser here. But there are a couple other teams that haven't had great off seasons either. We kind of touched on it a little bit when we talked about one of these teams, the Seattle Seahawks. They are confusing. That, if I had to sum up their offseason in one word, it would be confusing. Because this is a team that cut one of their top 2 receivers in franchise history, their second best receiver in franchise history, and cut in Tyler Lockett for nothing. I know he's making a lot of money, but he's still a guy that was, productive as a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 kind of guy. Would have been nice to have for your young guys like JSN that's starting to step up and take a bigger role. You then traded away Geno Smith, who, like I've said before, is a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. Geno Smith is someone that is the best in the NFL at dealing with pressure. And if you're playing in Seattle behind that offensive line, you have to be good at dealing with pressure, and Geno Smith was amazing at it. Then on top of that, they traded away their big athletic wide receiver 1 in DK Metcalf. He goes to the Steelers, gets his money. That one's fine. That one hurts, but it's still fine. You then decide, okay, we've lost our quarterback. We've lost two of our top three wide receivers. We haven't addressed our offensive line. What do we do now? We're going to try and compete. They go out and they sign Sam Darnold. They trade a top 10 quarterback for a top 20 quarterback. Then they pretend like it's going to be no big deal. They don't fix their biggest issue, which is the offensive line. They re-sign Ernest Jones, linebacker, for a pretty solid deal. I love Ernest Jones. They've made all of the right moves other than at the quarterback position, right? This is a team that looks like they're trying to compete, but they do that by taking 4 steps backwards and then 1 step forward. This is a team that's going to struggle in their division this year, and this is a team that I think has really lost the plot a little bit on what made this team go and what made this team be really successful, especially in the middle of the season last year. Another team that is in the loser bucket, very much related to the Seahawks, is the Steelers. They went out and they traded for DK Metcalf. They gave him a massive contract, but they haven't fixed their biggest issue. And they're going to be on the losers side of things until they do fix their biggest issue. They still need a quarterback. They can go out and put Band-Aids on a bullet hole all they want, but this team is getting weaker and weaker every single year. This is a team that is going off of the essence of what the Steelers were 10 years ago under Big Ben. This is a team that is trying its darndest to be successful without having the puzzle pieces in the puzzle the right direction, right? This is a team that is really trying. They had Justin Fields. He wanted to come back, but they were too scared to commit to him, which is fine if you're too scared to commit to him, but you should have a backup plan then. And right now their backup plan consists of, maybe we should get Aaron Rodgers. Maybe we should bring back Russell Wilson. This is just not a Steelers team or a Steelers offseason that's inspiring a lot of confidence in me. This is not a team that I look at and I say, wow, this Steelers team is making huge improvements. This is a Steelers team that with the addition of DK Metcalf, they're going to be able to get to that next gear. Maybe they can't, but they desperately need a quarterback. And until they get a quarterback, they will plant themselves firmly in the loser's side of the offseason. In that same vein of not fixing your biggest weakness, the Texans are another team that's been a loser in my mind. They're trading away their biggest weakness, the offensive line. They traded away Laramie Tunsil. They traded away Kenyon Green, both of which were on a pretty bad unit last year, but it's not like individual. It's like a hand, right? If individual fingers are doing their job, they won't get hurt, but the ones that are, sticking out, they're going to get broken if you throw a punch with it, right? The rest of that offensive line still needs to show up. It's not necessarily their fault that the offensive line was bad. Their numbers suffered because of it. They had to pick up a lot of the slack. But this is not the way that this offseason needed to go for them. There's a lot of things that they could do, and I like some of the smaller moves they've done, but they've completely decided to avoid their biggest issue, the glaring hole that caught up to them in the big moments in the regular season when they had to go up against a good defense in the postseason. They really struggled with the pass rush getting to CJ Stroud, and they're not making that problem any better. In fact, they're making it worse. So they're losers for this offseason. And the other two are just because they've been scared to make a big move. The Cowboys have done basically nothing. They went out and they signed Javonte Williams, finally getting a running back on the roster. But again, for these last two teams, the contracts for the guys that they need to give out, the Cowboys, Micah Parsons, got $5 million more expensive because they wouldn't pay. This is the same thing that happened with CeeDee Lamb. If they had paid him earlier, he would have cost about $3 million less a year, right? If they had paid Dak Prescott earlier, he would have cost like $10 million less a year. Instead, they wait, and now they're picking up scraps. They bring back Kevontae Turpin. He now gets 3 years, $18 million. That is the biggest contract for a special teamer. I like that move. I like what they're doing a little bit. But they haven't done anything to really turn this team around. They haven't done anything to address all of the concerns they have, which is especially on that defensive side of the ball. They lost a lot of defensive talent. They lost a lot of corners, a lot of defensive linemen. It has just not been a great offseason for the Cowboys, and mostly because they sit there twiddling their thumbs, sitting on their hands, waiting for the guys to come to them. They need to go out and be aggressive. And the other team, the only reason they're on here, they're probably more of an honorable mention, honestly, is just because of the contracts that have going on around the NFL. The ripple effects are turning into tsunamis and all crashing on to the Cincinnati Bengals. Trey Hendrickson asked for a trade. They couldn't pay him. They decided to bring back wide receiver 2 before bringing in the guy that led the league in sacks last year. The defense is falling apart. They brought in BJ Hill, brought him back, 3 years, $33 million. But this team is not doing enough to address a defense that was near historically bad last year, right? Contracts are going to get way more expensive. They could have paid Jamar Chase last year, and they would have only had to pay him about $30 million if they got in there fast enough. Instead, it goes from $30 million to $35 million, now to $40 million. They could have saved $10 million a year, but instead, because they're cheap, because they're dragging their feet on this, the defense falls apart into nothing. They throw away one of the best defensive coordinators in the game for nothing. And they find themselves in a situation where they can't build their team because they're promising too much and they can't deliver on the promises that they give to their players. This is a mess for the Bengals right now. They need to bring back Jamar Chase. They probably need to trade T. Higgins, honestly, and they definitely need to bring back Trey Hendrickson, despite him asking for a trade. This defense is falling apart, and there's not much they can do about it. The Bengals are a big loser. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. Who do you think has had the worst offseason so far? We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we turn our attention over to baseball. In the MLB, there's been a lot of big news, but none bigger than Garrett Cole. With the season just about 2 weeks away, just over 2 weeks away, Garrett Cole goes under the knife. Tommy John surgery for one of the best pitchers in baseball. We'll talk about the fallout of that, what's going on with the Yankees and the AL East because of that, coming up next here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found. For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Tuesday, March 11th. If you are just tuning in, we just finished going over all of the winners and losers from the NFL offseason so far. Free agency just about wrapped up, which is crazy to say after 2 days, but a lot of the big names, the big flurry, free agency frenzy is just about done. Some big names left to go, so this will change as time goes on, but for now, winners and losers, just went over them. In this segment, we turn our attention to baseball. Garrett Cole, a perennial Cy Young candidate, has been shut down for the season, undergoing Tommy John surgery. We'll talk about what that means for him, for the Yankees, and for the AL East, and all of baseball really coming up in just a second. But before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Tuesday, March 11th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into a little bit about Gerrit Cole. Gerrit Cole, one, like I said, of the perennial Cy Young candidate pitchers in the MLB today in the AL. He is dealing now with Tommy John. He is now, for the second year in a row in the spring, been shut down to deal with an injury. Last year, it was an elbow soreness. He had a little bit of swelling over there. He had to sit out for the first month or two of the season. He was able to come back. But now at age 34, going under Tommy John is not a great sign. We have plenty of pitchers that have come back from Tommy John at 34 years old. It's not impossible. But with 4 years, $144 million left on his contract, it's going to be tough for this Yankees team to find a place for him, because this is not a guarantee that he will ever come back and be the pitcher that he is. Again, 34 years old, getting Tommy John surgery, it's not an easy thing, right? Gerrit Cole, a perennial Cy Young candidate. Right now, it just doesn't look too good. It just doesn't look too good for them, right? Their starting rotation without Gerrit Cole consists of Max Fried, who they were able to sign. He was supposed to be part of a deadly 1-2 punch. Carlos Rodon, Marcus Stroman, Clark Schmidt, and Will Warren. The reigning AL Rookie of the Year, Luis Gil, also injured. This could very well sink the history. This could very well sink the season for the Yankees. This is not a good look for them. This is a team that made the World Series last year. Everything was looking up. They brought in a couple guys. They brought in some more bats and Paul Goldschmidt especially. But now we take a look at where the Yankees are. Everyone else in their division seemingly getting better. The Blue Jays had a really good offseason, I think. Not enough probably to rank them to the top of that division. But if Vlad Jr. can play good baseball, if Max Scherzer can turn back the clock a bit, this is a team that has a lot of talent, honestly, and could be dangerous, right? The Red Sox, very dangerous team. They go out and they get a guy that's going to rake an Alex Bregman at Fenway. This is an amazing signing for them. They could potentially win this division. The Rays, always dangerous. They're playing at a minor league park because a hurricane destroyed their ballpark, but they're going to play really good ball again. They always have very dangerous pitchers, very good bullpen, and the lineup that they've put together is solid already. And then the Orioles, lots of young talent. They kind of didn't do great this offseason, but still, the Yankees are old, right? You have a perennial Cy Young candidate now go down with Tommy John surgery. Aaron Judge is basically a one-man wrecking crew, as we see yet again. Giancarlo Stanton struggle to stay healthy. He is gone, going to be hurt for a little bit. He could come back, but he will come back at some point. But how many games is he going to miss? You have Aaron Judge, who, when he's in the lineup, is going to probably win the MVP again, honestly, in the AL. Probably going to win the MVP again because he's just very special when he connects with the baseball. Might even hit 70 home runs this year. But this is a Yankees team that, coming off of a World Series run, is just dealing with so much. That rotation really isn't good enough. They lost a lot in the bullpen, and this is a Yankees team with World Series aspirations. I think it's time for them to think about toning that down a bit. It's going to be a battle to win their division, and the rest of the AL is no cakewalk either. If they're not able to win the AL East, you still have, the AL West with the Astros and the Rangers and the Mariners in there that are going to have pretty good seasons. The AL Central, pretty good. 4 of those teams could make the playoffs. The Twins could have a bounce back year. The Tigers, who we'll get to next season, made the next segment, made the playoffs last year. The Royals made the playoffs last year. The Guardians made the playoffs last year. This is a dangerous AL, and if the Yankees deal with injuries like this, without Gerrit Cole, without Luis Gil for the beginning of the season, without a lot of their key batters, This is just a Yankees team that feels old and needs to inject some youth into itself. This is a Yankees team that is probably going to be just fine. They're not going to be bad. They're not going to be bad. But as far as World Series aspirations, without a Cy Young candidate, without the guy at the top of your rotation headlining everything, it's going to make this a whole lot harder. It's going to make this a whole lot harder for them to find any kind of long-term success this season. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think's going on with Aaron Judge? Do you think it's going to be what do you think is going to be the Yankees' outlook this season? Do you think without Garrett Cole, they'll be just fine? I'd love to hear your thoughts. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we continue our jaunt around baseball. The AL Central, we're about halfway through going over every single MLB team. Before the MLB season today, we touch on the Detroit Tigers. We'll be right back here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Tuesday, March 11th. If you are just tuning in, we just finished going over the big deal that was Tommy John surgery for Garrett Cole. He is done for the season and how that affects the Yankees. In this segment, we continue our talk about baseball, turning our attention to our season preview. Each and every team today, we dissect the Detroit Tigers. But before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Tuesday, March 11th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into a little bit about the Detroit Tigers. The Detroit Tigers coming off of a surprise great season. They came back out of nowhere. They were down at the MLB trade deadline, and they come all the way back to a wild card spot, finishing the season at 86-76, second in their division, lost in the ALCS. They took care of business in the first round before falling to the division winner of the AL Central, the Cleveland Guardians, in a 5-game series. The reason they were able to make it that far in the playoffs was because of their pitching staff. More importantly, more specifically, I should say, Tariq Skubal of that pitching staff, right? What they've been able to do this offseason has been kind of a masterclass. They were sellers at the deadline. They traded away Jack Flaherty to the Dodgers, where he won a World Series ring, and now has come back. This is going to be really cool to see. They've got a lot of young guys that can make a lot of big noise this season, especially on the offensive side of it if they get put in the right situations. They didn't lose too many people since most of their guys are already on their rookie deals, so they don't have to deal with a lot of the losses, but they did bring in a lot of pretty solid additions. Jose Urquidy on a 1-year, $1 million deal. Relief pitcher Andrew Chafin on a minor league deal. I love him in the bullpen. John Brebbia on a 1-year, $2.75 million deal for the bullpen. And we just mentioned it, the big fish of their offseason, Jack Flaherty. 2 years, $35 million for the World Series champion. He was a guy that played a huge role in them making it to the World Series and winning the World Series last year. He also was the guy that they traded away at the deadline. It's not often that you see a guy get traded away and then come back a year later. But when that happens, it is the best feeling in the world, right? You got all of the value from trading him, and then it's like you got it for free because you get him to come back. It's high risk, high reward. I'm sure that's not what they were planning, but being able to bring back Flaherty on a $17.5 million a year amount, it's pretty solid. They also went out and got a couple other guys for short term. Relief pitcher Tommy Canali, 1 year, $7.75 million. Gleyber Torres to be the starting second baseman, $15 million for a year. And Alex Cobb to add to that depth for the starting pitching, 1 year's $15 million as well. It's not like they didn't lose anybody. They lost Ryan Vilde and Brian Sammons. Overall, it balances out. They made a couple trades, not going to be too important for them this offseason, but I really do love what they've done. Again, the key for them, bringing back Jack Flaherty. They needed to go and develop that bullpen. They've done that, right? You take a look at this bullpen. They have 3 guys that could be considered closers, which not really the best, but Jason Foley, Bo Briesk, and Tyler Holton in that closer role. You've got Canali, you've got Will Vest, Andrew Chafin, who I really like on a minor league deal, John Brebbia, and Brant Hunter in the bullpen, but that rotation is going to be the star of the show. Tariq Skubal, Jack Flaherty, 1-2 punch. You also have Reese Olson, who had a pretty good season last year. Casey Mize and Kenta Maeda, while they're waiting on some of their guys like Alex Cobb and Jose Urquidy to get healthy. But when they do, that is 7 deep. That's a dangerous rotation. The lineup is no different, right? You bring in Gleyber Torres from the Yankees, second baseman, to lead off over there. Then you have Kerry Carpenter, one of the most underrated players in baseball. He is a guy that can come out and rake, especially against lefties, but he's a guy that can hit both. He was very situational last year. You have Kerry Carpenter in right or at DH. He's going to be amazing. Riley Green, a guy that really broke out last season in left field. That is a dangerous 2-3-4 with Spencer Torkelson at DH as well. That is a very dangerous top of the lineup, not one you want to face as any pitcher. Colt Keith at first base, Trey Sweeney or Javi Baez at shortstop. Javi Baez not going to play too much because, well, they took him out of the lineup and then they went on a hot streak that led them to the playoffs. He just doesn't have the eye. He doesn't have the control. He swings at literally everything. You could throw a paper ball. You could throw a paper at him and he would swing at it, right? You could throw something 4 miles into the stands. He would swing at it. It's just a mess. He needs to work on his eye before he can be any kind of valuable player to this team. Got Winfield Perez playing center. Jace Young or Andy Ibanez at third base. And Jake Rogers playing catcher for this team. This is a really solid lineup. There's nothing about this team that isn't solid. A little bit of the bullpen is weak, but you have a great starting lineup, great starting 5, a great projected lineup, and this is a team that's looking to build off of success. They have a really good manager, right? For everything you can say about the Astros cheating scandal, he's still a very, very good manager. The Tigers have a lot to be proud of, a lot to build on. Their win total set at 83.5. 83.5 for this team. I think that's a little low. Now, they went on a crazy hot streak down the stretch here. I think the rest of their division got pretty good as well. I'm not sure they're going to be able to get quite back up to 90 wins. So 83.5 I think is pretty fair. I'm going to put them at just over right now. I think their range for wins, anywhere from 80 to 85. I'm going with 84 wins on their season, finishing 84 and 78. That's going to be good enough for a playoff spot. So this is a team that I think gets back, and with their starting rotation, I think this is a team that nobody would like to run into in the playoffs. That 1-2-3 punch is exactly what you need if you want to be a underdog team that goes a little bit farther than people think in the playoffs. I love this Tigers team, and I love the way that they've continued to build. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think the Tigers are going to do next season? Do you think they'll be threats for World Series? Do you think they'll make the playoffs? I'd love to hear it. And thank you, everybody, so much for tuning in to today's episode of GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I've been your host, Jeremy Lapidus. We will be back tomorrow talking about everything from around the world of sports. We're going to get into a mock draft once free agency slows down, mock draft 4.0. That's going to come out before the end of the week. Not sure if that's tomorrow or not. And NBA power rankings, as we do every single Wednesday. So tune in for that. We'll be right back. We'll see you then. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna